I used to play by there, and then one day it rained, and I noticed by this bank, the river was kind of a distance, but I saw that there was a little puddle that formed. And so, as a little kid, I was playing there, I do stuff there. But one day, to my surprise, I found a bunch of frogs that were living there. And they were populating like crazy, and there were these cute little green frogs. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're just like this big. They don't get any bigger than this. And they're just jumping around. So my older sister, I have an older sister, and we made a profitable business. We made a stand and we would sell these frogs to people walking. So, But anyways, we were very excited. I was very excited to see this. I was like, wow, because it's a desert. You don't see something like that. It's unnatural. So these frogs were playing, and there was a nice little pond, and there was all kind of tadpoles. So, I don't know if you've ever done that. You got a tadpole and you watch it grow from day one till it gets feet. So it was a lot of fun. And one day it started to get hotter and hotter because it's not a marsh. It's not a natural habitat. It was a temporary thing. It rained. So it started to get hotter and hotter, and as it did, day after day, the puddle would get smaller and smaller. So pretty soon that puddle was shriveling up, and I started to feel bad for them because there's nothing you could really do. I came one day and a lot of them were already dead because that water had dried up. So they enjoyed there for a little time. They had their frog playland, I don't know. And they mated, they made all these babies, and then they stayed there. But little did they know that it was drying up. Pretty soon, there was no water, they couldn't live there, they all died. But the funny thing is just not even that far, there was a river, the Humboldt River. So I guess technically they could have, meandered over there. And, they would have been good, and they could have kept surviving. So that's actually, that was my personal experience, and I had to think of it because I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, because I read that recently, the Bhagavatam. It gave that analogy. It said, just as little creatures that live in the little ponds when it rains, they live there, and they have their families, they're very happy there. But as the sun comes up, then they cannot see, due to their attachment to that place, they cannot see how they're gradually losing everything. So similarly, it gives the analogy that we are also like that. We come to this world and we come to enjoy. And we have a lot of things. I saw it's very popular now, they call it a bucket list. It's like everything you want to do before you kick the bucket, before you die. So we all have our bucket list. We all have the list of things that we want to enjoy. And we are enjoying, on some level, it's like, yeah, of course I'm enjoying, I'm happy in my life. We have our family, we have our friends, we have our politicians, the elections coming in, it's like, who are you going to vote for? Obama again? So everyone has their politicians. And then we take shelter. We find, just as the frogs, they took shelter in that pond. That was their habitat. They lived there. They got a little sustenance. So we take shelter in friends, material things, amusement parks, entertainment, movies. In other words, we're trying to fill our time with things which we consider pleasurable. So we're trying to enjoy, we're trying to find pleasure. But that analogy is saying when we get too attached, because of that attachment to the pleasure, looking for pleasure in this world, we cannot see one important thing. That time is destroying everything that we work for. So there's another example. It said time, while the illusioned soul who is constructing this castle of enjoyment, time on the other side is taking it apart. So it said the illusioned soul cannot see how everything he's working so hard for is being dismantled by the time factor. So that is the point that it's saying, is that we get so attached to wanting to enjoy here that we, in that calculation for happiness, because we're calculating for happiness, we don't put that in the equation. Usually we don't calculate that. Okay, it's temporary. So it's a temporary place. This world is very extremely temporary. And that is the number one illusion that the Bhagavatam teaches us, is that how temporary it really is. We ignore it. Why? That desire to enjoy. Because we think that life, what is life? We think this is a place to enjoy. So to that degree, we think that this world is a place of enjoyment. To that degree, we will be illusioned, and we may not look for the water. Like the little frogs, they stuck to their little pond, but real water was there. The river was not so far. But because they were so attached to that, and they were caught up and they were enjoying their eat, drink, and be merry lifestyle, they were not able to leave that and find a greater source. So that's one of the pitfalls, is when we become too attached to the materialistic enjoyment. Then we lose the urge to find a higher pleasure. And so the first instruction of Vedanta Sutra, which is a very essential Vedic text, Atha Brahma Jigyasa, it means now, Atato Brahma Jigyasa, now that we have the human form, now that we have a human body, we can begin to inquire, Janma Yasya Yata. We can look for what is the source of life. So the benefit of having a human body is we can ask the question, why are we here? What are we doing here? What is the purpose of us here if we have to die and we can't stay here? So death is not a negative thing. Death can be positive. We actually published an article in our latest paper about this, how to see death in a positive light. We can look at death and it can make us ask these really important questions. Why am I here? So when we see the temporary nature of this world, we can start to see how the petty pleasures that we take part in, they really don't amount to anything. And doesn't mean, it's not pessimism, but it's meant to inspire optimism, because then we can look for the real happiness, the real source of pleasure. We have to know where life's all coming from. So human beings can see that. They can see where life is coming from. They can see that, okay, we're all in this room, we all have different lives, but we're all interconnected. Each one of us is living on the same planet. We're drinking water, the sun, we're sleeping, the earth's rotating, we're waking up seeing the sun, we're seeing the same moon, we're seeing the same stars. We're all in the same boat. So we all think we have different lives, we have different goals. I have my goal, you have your path, everyone has their own path. In reality, we don't have our own path. We're all treading the same path. And so it makes sense to see the connection and to help others see that connection too. So in yoga, it's not for selfish person to become enlightened. That's very important to them, to become enlightened. You wouldn't think that. Why would be enlightened being selfish? But selfish means they want to become enlightened. But actually, real enlightenment's not like that. Real enlightenment means if you see something, a greater truth, or something more beneficial, you cannot exist within that and not want to give it to others. So real yoga means making a connection, not just for yourself, but you making a connection with the rest of all of life. So that's enlightenment. It's not that I become enlightened and then I'll know, and others, they won't know, I don't care. No, enlightenment means you feel for the whole. We're all here. And we're all progressing. And so that's one of the things, we try to talk about is how to create a spiritual revolution. This is Krishna Lounge, place for spiritual revolution. So revolution, we want to change something. And that's the materialistic values of modern day. And those materialistic values, just like the frogs in the pond, they just, who cares for tomorrow? Let's just play. The pond's shrinking up, and they're just playing their life away. So the real revolution is when we look, what's really important? What's really important? Gratifying our physical body at the cost of others suffering? Or looking for a higher truth? Finding that higher source of pleasure and satiation, and more importantly, bringing others, helping them, helping those who you can help. So that's spiritual revolution. It's simple. It doesn't cost any money, but it might cost the time. A little sacrifice, but that's what it costs there. So, thank you very much for everyone coming. Is there anyone want to add or share something? Yes.
Those
Katie.
billboards that we see and we were driving down the freeway, and oftentimes they're there to disillusion us, but I saw one that said, are you gambling away more than just your life? And I thought that was pretty inspired to have that up there.
You saw the good in it? Yeah. Because so billboards, they're designed to make people feel they're lacking. That's how the business works. They put the pretty person, the so-called pretty person, what society determines as like the standard for beauty, and then the guy has his arm around the girl and he's got the beer, and then they're like, yeah, we're enjoying like anything, and then you're supposed to see that and be like, oh, that's why I can't get the girl. I gotta get that beer. Just occurred to me. And what's even more dark than that is if you look in all alcohol ads, there's subliminal messages and weird symbols, and almost all of them. There's a book about it, and it's not a speculation. It's true. They put a lot of skulls and like things with death and like a lot of weird stuff. In other words, it creates intense emotion. So when you see it, your problems, the deepest problems in the seat of the human conscience, which is death and suffering, they invoke those emotions. So people take shelter of alcohol in order to deal with their problems. So they actually pay psychologists to manipulate people's darkest, or deepest emotions. So that this is the kind of culture we live in, and that's why it's important that we have spiritual revolution, because it's serious, and to that degree we're not part of the solution. We're part of the problem. We encourage others. Just enjoy. So we have to see it. We're not here to enjoy. We're here to learn. We're here to learn, gain higher understanding.